Is Tuesday, September 3rd, and this is the School District of Waukesha Committee Meeting, Teaching and Learning Committee for the month of September. Can we verify that the meeting's been properly posted?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Well, before minutes, just welcome back to everybody to the new school year, and it's exciting to jump right in and talk about curriculum. We've got a lot of new curriculum in place. And some of that work has been happening over the last couple years, so let us start with approval of the teaching and learning minutes from the August 6th meeting.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Passes 5-0. We have an opportunity for public comment. Did anyone sign up to speak tonight?
Not tonight.
Okay, thank you. Next is a discussion and possible action on an update to policy 5460, which is graduation requirements. I'll turn it right over to Mrs. Gennerman.
Good evening and happy first day of school to everyone. In the last few meetings, we've been having a conversation regarding this policy. It started actually last in spring. Our first conversation was in last spring regarding the Act 60 requirements for that standalone financial literacy course. So since then, we've been discussing and modifying the policy. Some of it is around specific wording. Some of it is around looking for alignment with that wording, and then the overall representation of the expectations with the credits. So since our last conversation, as a team, Mr. Pat, Ms. Ryan, myself have worked together along with the FIED department and athletic directors regarding that FIED piece. So what I was thinking to do tonight is just to kind of walk through the whole thing in its entirety, and then we just kind of talk about some of the changes along the way, and then we can have more conversation. But I think all good work in progress as we work to align the language throughout the policy. So first here on this first page, these are changes that have been shared with you previously, as noted in the green, that we continue to have the civics assessment that is part of that graduation requirement that's included in for each student as they graduate. Below what we have is the chart that we revised so that, if you recall, we had the courses and then we had additional notes and additional documentation. And so what we did is we merged those notes into the subject area. So now we have it broken down to what is required for class of, prior to class of 2028, and then for the class of 2028 and beyond with that financial literacy credit. At a previous meeting, we've already talked about the English changes we've made to include the AP courses. So I'll move on to the next page. Here we previously talked about just merging those previous notes into the mathematics section. And then under financial or personal finance, what you'll see here is the changes that were brought forward previously with that 0.5 credit in the right column. We did note here, too, that students graduating prior to 2028 must have participated in curriculum related to financial literacy in order to earn a diploma. Just noting that it wasn't a standalone, but it was embedded within their courses, that they had the required courses that they got to choose from, that topic was covered. Here in the physical education part, this is where, since our last conversation, we had a lot of collaboration around what was in the policy, what is stated in our course guidebook, what is also stated on our FIED waiver, and just talked a little bit more with others about our practices and procedures throughout the district. So you'll see that here that it's the same number of credits, but we really clarified the language. And so maybe Mr. Pat can walk us through that, and then we also had have a FIED waiver that we can share with you as far as the changes.
Thank you, Ms. Gennerman. So in clarifying the language, the clarity really comes with that 90 hours of activity that is considered for the waiver. That PE waiver goes to a coach, and the coach would be the individual who, or advisor that determines those 90 hours and signs off on it. And then it would go to the athletic director, and then they would collaborate to see if that 90 hours meets the criteria. So they will look at that specifically for whatever sport or activity is put through the PE waiver. There are there are sports that are on there, and specifically they are WIA recognized or endorsed, or other school-sponsored activities. Those individual sports are there. However, it doesn't always mean that they meet the 90-hour threshold potentially. So that is the key to getting the PE waiver to be recognized for that individual student.
And like I said, we were looking for consistency in language between the PE waiver, the policy, and the course guidebook. What we found is there were some discrepancies, but I think at the end of the day, we didn't want the individual qualifying activities or sports to be listed in a policy, and because that would require us to come back anytime anything was adjusted for that. And so we felt strongly that having them listed and having the process in place with Mr. Pat and the athletic directors to go through that approval process to have an activity added would summarize what all those activities are best, rather than putting it in a policy. Moving on the policy, we had the science portion and the social studies portion. None of that had been changed since our previous conversations. And while it's not numbered, this is page 3, which has those previous notes and previous chart that was crossed out. And then moving on with the policy, there were a few minor changes here that we didn't discuss last time, just looking for consistency with other policies regarding the addition of the Wisconsin state statute and formatting of that. Here's where you see the physical education waiver part eliminated from the policy, and then we have it noted in the FIED part and referenced as we discussed. Students, there's a category for students with disabilities. This refers to a different policy. So just for consistency, we wanted to reference the name of the policy under that section. And then moving forward, some of the other minor changes were under the policy reporting and review. We previously had talked about the district administrator rather than superintendent. And upon reading this for the 500th time, just noted that the last statement where it says, "It shall be the policy of the board to periodically review," that statement was really under the section of exchange students, so we moved that up to be included in the policy reporting and review section. So that really is a total overview of that policy now, based on all the conversations we had at this point. So I'll turn it over to you guys for conversation, and Mr. Pratt, myself, or Ms. Ryan can answer questions based on questions.
I'm not seeing anybody. I have a couple, so maybe I'll start. First, a comment. I really like what you did with the FIED waiver, and I think that will drive the consistency from school to school that we've been looking for, so I'm very okay with that. One thing that I actually, and I apologize, I neglected to ask about this last month, but it was not included when we talked about this in May, was the strikeout on the middle school graduation credit that actually, there's a statement, I'm looking at page 5, that courses taken at the middle school level would appear on the transcript along with the grade, but that would not be factored into the GPA. Is there a reason why that was removed?
Maybe Ms. Ryan thinks. Okay.
Myself right now, I think what happened is
Can you hit your mic?
It literally was stated 3 times in there, and so I think we took it out and we moved it. So like if you look in the math box and the science box, we do have the integrated math 1 course taken in middle school will count toward the 25 credits, but will not be calculated. So I think the only part that is missing there is that will appear on the transcript. Is that correct?
Possibly, Ms. Ryan, can you just direct me to the page or the phrase?
So the second page, the green box, the math box. So if you read where the asterisk is,
Okay.
it says, I believe everything that you just referred to in that strikeout, except it is missing the student's high school, that will be on the transcript. So we copied that in math and science
Yep, I see
and
it.
foreign language.
And I
but-
think the only, it was my fault. It actually says GPA instead of grade point average, so I was searching for that same sentence somewhere, and I just didn't find it because it says GPA. But that makes more sense. And the same language is repeated under science.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm okay with that. I think at this point, most people know what a GPA is, but we probably haven't defined it anywhere in the policy, so. Yeah. Any other questions? We thought this was just going to be a half credit change on a table. But I really do appreciate all the time and effort that you all put into this, and I think it's going to drive a lot more consistency and some clarity around what we're aiming for, especially for our incoming freshmen who have this new requirement. So. Okay. This is a possible action.
I would move to approve the update to policy 5460, graduation requirements.
Second.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any more comments. All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you very much.
Thanks. I can just share that after this vote that you guys took, then what we'll do is we'll go back and meet with principals as well as athletic directors and just making sure that the consistent messaging and forms get out. But we did already collaborate with many of them, so I think this is a good next step for us.
Wonderful. All right, well, surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, we are pretty caught up on our content areas. I know we've got some pilots happening, but we've implemented a whole lot of new things. So we are going to move right into other business, which is our assessment update.
Yeah, so tonight Mrs. Heinzel is going to join me, previously known as Jamie Kupkovitz, who's recently married. So she's going to join me as the Director of Assessment and Student Services. And tonight what we have for you is an assessment update. I'm sad to say that we won't have any actual numbers to share tonight. Any state performance state assessment results are still embargoed until later this fall. I don't know that we've heard just yet of when they would be released, but as always, when we do have them, we will come back and share them with you. But she has been working hard with all the assessment pieces throughout our district with all the other directors and coordinators. So she'll give you an update as far as 3 specific things for this school year. And then based on conversation here tonight, our plan would be to continue communication throughout our system. And I'll go out.
All right, there we go. All right.
All right, good evening, everybody. So as Jen Getterman mentioned, I'm going to review some assessment updates and review the purpose and the goals for assessment in the School District of Waukesha. So there are 3 updates that I will talk about tonight. So one is updates to our universal screener for our elementary grades, the universal screener for our 9th graders, and then updates to the Wisconsin Forward exam. All right, so to start, when we think about the why behind assessment, so we do have assessment goals within our district, and assessments are more than just giving a test. So when we consider using assessments, we really want to use it as a catalyst for learning. So, and we do that by using a collaborative process and really working to build what's called a balanced assessment system. And so we do this in order to ensure that all of our students are achieving grade level or above essential standards or essential skills. And this is done through our classroom, our district, and our state assessments. So you can see those assessments listed here. So at the classroom level, we have common formative and summative assessments. We have our district assessments across our school grade levels, and then we have those state assessments. So when we're using our classroom assessments to inform our daily practices, those should lead us to understanding where our students are going to be performing on our district and state assessments. So we shouldn't be overly surprised how they're performing if we're keeping up to date on their progress on those daily assessments in the content areas in the classroom. In addition, we want to make sure that we're using our data in a strategic and meaningful way. So again, looking at it as that catalyst for change. So our data should be informing us through instruction. It should lead to improved outcomes and growth and achievement. In order to do this, we really need to understand what the type of assessments we have, first of all, are, and then what we can do and how we can interpret the data using that specific assessment tool. So we want to make sure we're using our assessment tools as they are designed for, and not trying to get more information out of that tool given its intended purpose. All right, so let's talk about change number 1. So as we are aware, so DPI in July announced that Ames Web Plus would be the selected universal screener. This is a requirement of Act 20. In order to maintain consistency across our system, our 4th and 5th grade students will also be administered the Ames Web Plus assessments. So we've taken some steps to be prepared for the administration of this assessment. So a training team has been meeting over the summer and has been looking at the assessments and put together a presentation for our teachers. And this presentation was given to teachers on August 22nd during our Summer Institute. So during that training, they were provided with how to administer the assessments, and they received materials in order to complete the assessments. So the more we learn about Ames Web Plus, it is still rather new as far as what the state has provided us with. We will provide update training to our staff regarding how to interpret the results and the data once we have that.
And just to add with that change, it's not an additional test to what we were using, which was FastBridge. This is in replace of that for the literacy
Correct.
part.
Yes, so that's a great segue. So Ames Web Plus is very similar to FastBridge, which, as Ms. Gennerman just indicated, was our universal screener that we used last year for our elementary students in the area of literacy or reading. So iReady for Math will continue to be used at the elementary in the area of mathematics. So similar to FastBridge, Ames Web is given 3 times a year. So this is called benchmarking or screening. And this allows us to identify students who need those extra supports early on. We can report out on student progress, and then we can also predict performance on grade level expectations. So the Ames Web Plus assessments are considered brief, valid, and reliable measures of those foundational skills. So again, similar to how FastBridge was administered, most measures take a couple minutes to give, which is intended to save on instructional time. The assessments also are standards-based, and they're aligned to current standards for learning. Okay. All right, so our Ames Web Plus assessments will also be administered in the fall, winter, and spring months. Again, very similar to our previous universal screener of FastBridge. Our second change for tonight that we're going to talk about is the universal screener that we will be using at the district level for our ninth graders. So this is a change, as if you recall, our ninth grade students in the fall and the spring receive the NWEA MAP test. So a team has been studying the pre-ACT 8-9 over the course of the last year, so high school assessment coordinators, principals. We've learned about the pre-ACT, and we felt that the benefits that pre-ACT 8-9 offered outweighed our current use of the MAP test at this time. So we are looking to move forward with administration of the pre-ACT 8-9. So some of those benefits of the pre-ACT include early experiences with items that are typically found on the ACT. It does give a predicted ACT score. We can identify strengths and opportunities to grow. And students also have the ability to share their performance with colleges for scholarships and recruitment. In addition, the pre-ACT is an early indicator of college and career readiness, so it does align to the same 1 through 36 point scale with a top score of 30. So it has similar predicted score ranges in subject and composites, so similar to the ACT, so you can see a sample of what that report would look like on this slide. So our teachers will hopefully be administering this come the fall, and we will be giving, again, some more specifics around the data and how to strategically use it to inform instruction. All right, and our third change for tonight is looking at the Wisconsin Forward exam. So there are some updates to the look of the individual student report, or the ICR, for this, this past school year. So one of the first changes that we'll notice on the ISR is the reporting categories have changed. So they have changed to more asset-based categories and now include the terms of developing, approaching, meeting, and advanced. There are also new cut scores for the ELA and mathematics subject areas, and they are now aligned to the ELA and mathematics academic standards. So something important to note here is, given the new cut scores, we cannot compare the scores to last year's performance. So we should be considering the 2024 administration a new trend in data, because we're no longer comparing apples to apples with the past assessment, given the new cut scores and the alignment to the standards. So that is something important to note. Also new on the individual student report is a new reading assessment with a corresponding individual student reading score. So this was added for educational outcomes and increased reading comprehension accountability. All right, one other update we wanted to share was our new School District of Waukesha assessment webpage. So you can access the website here. And it is also under the Teaching and Learning tab, and if you search under the Assessment tab, you'll find it here. So one of the things we want to do is increase our communication for our families, as well as offer information for our staff regarding the assessments that we administer in the School District of Waukesha. So you will see on this website, there is information for parents specifically about each of our assessments and why we administer them. Our school report card information is linked here, so when we have the most recent information, it will also be edited. Our school district assessment calendar is also listed on here, so parents can see when certain assessments are administered. As we scroll down, you can also see that linked on the right is any parent communication that goes out when applicable. After that's sent out, it would be linked here on the district website. So it can always be referenced there as well too. And as we scroll down to the bottom here, there are also assessment resources for families and our staff as well to look at should they need more information about, again, why we administer assessments in Wisconsin and how to interpret the data sources. All right, so that concludes our updates in assessment for tonight. Are there any questions?
Mrs. Koenig, thank you.
Oh, thank you. This is great. It's not really a question, but I just want to tell you how much I really love and appreciate this transparency in here, and everything's at a parent's fingertips. They can see the whole district at a glance. They can also dive in and look at the school. This is truly transparent. I remember years ago being a parent and trying to get any type of data and trying to go through the state website, and it was just, it felt like you were going through a lot of hoops, and it was very difficult. So I really appreciate that this is all so readily available and extremely transparent, and I do appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Brooks, and then Mrs. Kozlowski.
Thank you. Yeah, the website looks great. I think that's something that's going to be really helpful for parents. So I just had a question about the pre-ACT. I know you mentioned that once once you guys get data, you'll kind of retrain the teachers on how to interpret that and how to use that to inform instruction. Is there going to be a more like personalized element for students? So let's say if a student, needs to get a couple points better in math, is there going to be like a specific focus for that kid, or is it going to be more broad, just kind of looking at class-wide trends?
Thank you for that question. Yes, I mean, that would definitely be something that we could consider including in part of that training, because those, even those changes in points, however small, do make a huge difference for a student. Yep, thank you.
Mrs. Kozlowski.
This is good stuff. I'm gonna kind of pelt on some of the changes just for the fact that the topic of conversation is data analysis, trends, benchmarks, relevancy. Are we winning? Are we losing? So I'll start with the elementary side for the literacy. When we had last really talked about Act 20, we were happy with one of the selections that we had that was approved by DPI for the actual instructional materials. And we talked about professional development that was ongoing over the course of the summer and preparing, which is now day one of school, that this instructional material is being presented. When we talked, we did not think we were going to lose Fastbridge. So we have 1 year of data with Fastbridge that didn't link to what we had prior to Fastbridge, and now we're going to start with Ames Web. So the question that I'm trying to get my arms around on, because how do we get to a point that we can try to corral the data? Parents are going to want to ask, I want to know how my child is doing. I want to be able to see a trend in growth, and are they moving along and where they need to from where they were? And just an overall concern that DPI, again, is changing what the measurement is. So we're going from below basic, proficient, to a new set of pieces. And when you say the cut scores, the way that I am hearing that is that means that they have, again, lowered the scores. So what used to be an A or a B now has shrunk, that they can achieve an A at a lower percentile. Am I correct in understanding?
I'm not aware that that necessarily means that they've lowered the standard. So what will happen is when we can see where all of the districts fall, it would give us a better indication of where that range is as far as the new asset-based categories that they're using. But not necessarily the cut scores, do they mean that they're lower? I'd have to look more specifically into if that specifically is a lowered cut score, given the realignment.
I will want to know that, and I will want to say what was basic, proficient, as we used to measure, and how that aligns up. So if I was proficient last year and now I'm advanced, that tells me something that is not in the right direction of where I think we should be challenging for the students. But really just for you and your role as trying to get your arms around this data and present to us, here's how our students have grown, and track that. I really don't even have a means to ask you how to do that, but we're asking you to do that. And get through all that. So that, I think the elementary side is again new, so now we're on almost effectively 4 years of data that we can't align apple to apple to really give that, that we'll just need to be thoughtful about on how we present it. Going into the same thing with the forward exam and the pre-ACT pieces, the concern still then is if we are building data to trend. It's one thing if we can't trend it, but it's a different thing when we start to take the buckets and shift things around, that what was proficient now means advanced. And I have and it may or may not, but I'm really concerned about what that means, because so much of what SDW is pushing is that we hold our students to an extremely high standard, that we believe that they can achieve high things, and that we are indeed preparing them for the world that they're going to enter in. And so looking through all of these pieces, and I would reiterate, like, this is a lot to present and a lot to change and get our arms around coming into a new school year. But those are some of the pieces for me that just give me great pause and concern as to how can we effectively report and measure how our students are doing. Because we know that we are building and implementing all of the foundation and the framework to give them, and yet they keep changing the way that we're testing them on it. So that is where I will leave you with, but something to consider as we start to get through the next rounds, and how do we talk through that? And I will reiterate what everyone else said too. The website and having one place for all of these pieces is brilliant. So I appreciate that.
One thing I will share is, so some of the things on the report card that we will be, that haven't changed are like the student growth percentile measures and then the percentile measure. So those also would be measures to look at for like individual student growth.
Great, thank you.
Much of what Mrs. Kozlowski said, I'm not going to repeat, but there are a couple things. So just a question too. It's my understanding that we don't have the black box lookup table to bridge between proficient and meeting, because the exam itself has changed. So it's my understanding that we can't look to our administrative team to solve this problem for us, because the transfer function doesn't exist because of the way the exam's been changed.
Correct, and currently we don't have that, so that's where we can only see like the individual pieces, and so we're trying to go off of that. And I know that some people who are data dorks have tried to do their own correlation. However, that's really, we're waiting for DPI to tell us the correlation so that we can then cross-reference it rather than coming out with our own. But we've been trying to look at it individually, and with the changes, we've been trying to communicate that with all the principals as they've started to look at their student information. So we don't have that master key yet.
Well, and I recall in 2021, when DPI decided to unilaterally kind of change the school report cards, they were forced, or at least adamantly requested, to go back and provide us at least the prior year formula versus the current year formula. But if the test has in fact changed, and it does sound like some of those decisions were made, I don't believe anybody from our district was consulted on how those changes were made. So whoever was involved in that process was not us. But unfortunately, not only does it handicap the teachers and administrators from being able to understand where kids are at and support them, as a parent, navigating the test score. So I love what we've done. I think providing that transparency to parents is so important, and the consistency. So I love that. But when a parent can't make sense out of those test scores, it's really hard to help them understand how we need to work with them to help their kids. And then the last part of it is just the millions of dollars that we've invested in curriculum in response to our understanding of where our students were at and needing to really raise them up and set high standards and high expectations. And unfortunately, we don't have a meaningful yardstick at this point in time to measure the impact of that, and that's just really disappointing. I know I'm speaking, I'm preaching to the choir here, but I do think that we need to demand of the DPI any assistance in creating those transfer functions so that we can help our students, teachers, parents, and administrators understand where we're at, because we're going to be going in blind after making a significant investment in what we believe to be the right way to improve our resources, and here we are, and I don't think I think that's by design, right? Because somebody didn't like the language and somebody didn't like the outcomes, and gosh darn it, we can do better for our kids, and yet now we can't even measure and report that we did. I think some of the preliminary outcomes we've seen in iReady and what's happening at our individual school levels is just amazing, but I don't know what that's going to look like on a forward exam. So it's just really unfortunate, and again, I know we're all in the same boat. But I don't, it's probably unfair for us to look to our administrative team and say, tell us how this compares to last year, because I don't think anybody has the equation.
In reference to the elementary changes, I would just want to give kudos to Jamie, Ms. Yao, the whole team. I mean, we found out in July that it was going to be Ames Webb, and the team has pivoted and begged, borrowed, and maybe not stole some resources to get our teachers as training as soon as possible. So just thank you to the whole team for just pivoting in that area, and we'll continue to work to collaborate and communicate so that it's as easy as possible, especially as we're sharing individual student results and then school results as well as district results, and just continue to advocate.
Mrs. Kozlowski.
Yeah, and I want to reiterate that. I think that when we talk through all of these things and to that point, we need to make sure that you guys understand that you're supported and appreciated and all of that. We get that. I think it is just really frustrating when the goalposts keep changing to try to hit there. And the measurements shouldn't change. The expectations need to remain high, and how we hold that and test that needs to remain true. So every year or two to keep doing this to get is just crazy. So we do recognize how hard this has been through Act 20, through all of the changes relative to all that. So I do want to make sure Dr. Piasek, had that good point. We recognize that, but somehow we still owe our parents and community a means to be able to say, how are we doing? And my last point will be, God, I'm really babbling, is the curriculum that we have put in place is rigorous, and it is tough, and it is expecting our students to live up to that standard that we know that they can do, which would tell me no matter what test we put them on, we're preparing them for that. Okay.
No, it was good. Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you very much for the context around all of this. There's so many moving pieces, but it's really great to have knowledgeable people working on this. All right, our last item tonight is a discussion and possible action on our key performance indicators. I'm going to hand it back to Ms. Skennerman because my computer's rebooting. I gotta
Well, I got it this time. I got the KPI thing up. It's always like a trick of skills if you're talking and trying to get the presentation up and take over the screen share. So got it this time. So tonight, we are going to continue our conversations around the key performance indicators. Just like last month and each other committee talked about key performance indicators, tonight we'll focus in on our teaching and learning ones. Just as a reminder, last month when we talked about what key performance indicators we had and some recommendations, this is where our conversation really focused on is around the school report card, continuing to monitor that as a district, but not as a key performance indicator. We had a KPI around GPA. Our recommendation is to discontinue that as a KPI, but discuss that with principals. Again, going back to what action is the most, or what data is the most actionable to meet the needs of students. We had a few KPIs around state assessments, one being ACT and one being forward. The recommendation was to revise those, and I'll bring those forward in more detail. And then we also had a key performance indicator in the area of English language proficiency. We'd like to continue to monitor that as a department, but not a KPI moving forward. So that's just a reminder of kind of what we discussed last month. And here, what I have are potentially the recommended 3 key performance indicators for teaching and learning. The first one, and all of them really being on that focus of continuous improvement, regardless of what other districts are doing, what the assessment is, what the scale score is, in the proficiency bands. So I tried to draft something that was reflective of our current state and could help us move forward, that no matter what number it is on what test, we're always going to look to improve. And that's really the idea behind these three. And so they don't have a specific number to say met or not met. We just continue to work on improving. So the first one is to have an increased percentage of students at the 3rd grade level meeting or advanced, or falling into that category of meeting or advanced in the proficiency levels in the area of English language arts. That would be for 3rd grade. The other one is focused on 8th grade, students meeting or the advanced, falling in the meeting or advanced performance level for the math assessment as with the Wisconsin State Assessment being forward. And then the last one really being around that junior ACT year, focusing still on that college and career readiness benchmark in the areas of reading and math. At one point, there had been conversations around that average composite that we used to have. And I think in previous conversations, I had just said, like, as an educator, that's really hard to make forward progress with students because it's so vague. I had then shared that some of the information we get from ACT is tracking the number of students that are meeting the college and career readiness benchmarks in 3 out of the 4 core areas. But even upon the development and bringing forward these recommendations, we really felt that focusing on reading and math would help align with our elementary and middle school goals with reading and math, but also help us to narrow in on data that we can take actionable steps on. Because when we say we're looking to increase the percentage of students that are college and career ready in 3 of the 4 core areas of ACT, it could be any 3 of the 4. And Mr. Pat and I were collaborating on this and kind of went through every scenario where at the end of the day, we wouldn't always know if the same students were struggling on the same content. So that's where bringing forward this increased percentage of students who are meeting those college and career readiness benchmarks on the ACT and the reading and math would increase. That would be our final recommended KPI. And with that, because I know not everyone lives in ACT land, I just wanted to share just this little piece about what does it really mean to be college and career ready according to the ACT as our state assessment for all those junior students. And so ACT has a test benchmark that they put forward that we can use to look at the students' readiness when it comes to the students having a high probability of success in credit-bearing first-year college courses. And students who meet the benchmark on the ACT have approximately a 50% chance of earning a B or better, and approximately a 75% chance of earning a C or better in a corresponding college course. We've had conversation around that students also going to a technical school need just as high a level of reading ability when they're reading a technical manual. And so really applying this across any post-secondary goals. So ACT themselves puts forward that benchmark, and every so often they do they will, if needed, adjust those benchmarks, but these are the benchmarks for English, mathematics, reading, and science that we'd be looking for each student to achieve. And then we look at the percentage of students who are achieving that based on these benchmarks. I didn't put those exact numbers of benchmarks in the ACT because with the changes, I thought it'd be safe than sorry to just keep it general. And as it changes, we'll always be looking to continuous improve, whether it's a higher benchmark or a higher percentage of students. So those are the three recommended key performance indicators that I wanted to bring forward and have additional conversation on. So I'm happy to leave these up and entertain any conversation or possible revisions. Teaching or student services also had a similar conversation around student attendance in the area of engagement. So.
Mr. Brooks.
Thank you. Yeah, so looking at this third KPI regarding ACT, and I know you kind of mentioned keeping it loose for the purpose of adapting to any future changes. So it's my understanding that one of DPI's changes with the ACT was making the cut score for college and career readiness, dropping it from a 21 to a 19, which I don't think a 19 even gets you into a number of UW schools in the state. So another example of lowering the bar for our students. But just kind of thinking of when we dig into this further, if our benchmark is going to be kind of sticking with that previous benchmark of college and career readiness, or if it's just going to be contingent on what DPI asks.
I think we could look at it a couple different ways. We'll have historical information of where our students performed, but also as if ACT has new and revised benchmarks based on their data, at that point, we'd have to look at that. So I think we'll have to just be ready to pivot and share whatever information we have for whatever situation. But ideally, we'd like to have the trending data as with everything.
Mrs. Kozlowski.
These are good. I think these are the right benchmarks and the measurements to have. And when I take a look at just throughout how we've been talking throughout all of the curriculum implementations, each of these are the crutch of where student success rests. Each of them defines the power of where their leverage is. And so I think this is the right thing to do. I like that there's not a specific number, because who we're competing against is what we know we can get our students to do. And I think despite what that looks like, if the bar is lowered, it doesn't mean that we have to do that, but we can at least measure ourselves and be able to do that over time and then figure out how to maneuver that. I think these are great.
I think to Mr. Brooks's point, I mean, at least the state of Wisconsin has not changed the ACT exam. So we still have some consistency and we know year to year what we're looking at. So regardless of where those threshold scores are, I think our goal is to continue to improve our students' performance on the reading and math portions of the ACT. And I think, these are these are immediate but also long-term goals, right? If we're hitting the targets in third grade and in eighth grade, then we can expect to see those performance improvements at the higher levels. So I think maybe to your point, we could potentially modify the language a bit so that it's not meeting the college and career readiness, but that continuing to improve relative to our current performance.
I don't have language right now off the top of my head, but I can script something out so that it's a little bit more general. So making revisions to that part of the statement, but still focusing on the reading and math part.
Yeah, so I would say we could maybe just add a phrase at the end that says, while maintaining or while continuing to improve. Yeah. And it doesn't even have to be overall composite. I'm just thinking like with the reading and math scores. Or start with continue to improve reading and math scores while increasing the percentage of 11th grade students who meet the college and career readiness benchmark on the state ACT assessment in reading and math. Is we'll be able to take whatever the new, if those thresholds change, we can map those back to previous years and just adjust. I think that continuous improvement is important. And I think we've seen that for the last couple of years, at least a steady marching forward. Mr. Brooks?
Well, and I think too, with shifting to the pre-ACT, I think that's only going to aid in helping with this benchmark too. And I to echo the sentiments of my colleagues, that I think this is what we should be focusing on in terms of our KPIs, and I'm really excited about these.
I think these KPIs, and this has been a really productive exercise and kind of taking a big step back, right? We're talking about the weather vane. We're not talking about the barometer and the thermometer and all the things that we're going to continue to measure things. We're going to continue to have metrics, but these are going to tell us, the general direction of the progress that's being made, and then we'll kind of drill that back down. But I think these are, they're high enough level, but they're encompassing the things that we're really working on. So I think these are the right measurements. And, as much as I love science, I think it's going to be hard to expect every student to reach certain benchmarks in science if that's not their passion. Maybe it's music, maybe it's art. So I think reading and math, that's what we're on the hook for. And so I think these all complement each other really well. I think the other areas will come along with that.
And I did make note of the changes.
We're good to go.
I did make note of the changes, so as we move forward, we can adjust that.
Okay. Mrs. Koenig?
I just want to mention too, like you said, Dr. Piasek, if you focus on the math and the reading, those two skills alone will do nothing but strengthen science and social studies. I mean, if you perform well on those two, they both carry over into the other areas immensely. So you'll see improvements in the other two as well.
All right. So, Ms. Gennerman, do you want to read back what you have, and then we could maybe seek some movement on what's presented?
The first proposed KPI would stay the same, reading as increase the percentage of third grade students at the meeting or advanced performance level on the state assessment in English language arts. The next one would stay the same as far as increasing the percentage of eighth grade students at the meeting or advanced performance level on the state assessment in math. And then the last one would be revised to say, while continuing to improve our overall reading and mathematic student performance, we will increase the percentage of 11th grade students who meet the college and career readiness benchmark on the state ACT assessment in reading and math. here, but I think I want to,
Any thoughts?
I need the third one read back again.
The first part?
while continuing to improve our students' performance in the area of reading and math, we will increase the percentage of the 11th grade students who meet the college and career readiness benchmark on the state ACT assessment in reading and math. Starting with while continuing to improve.
Can we just change it to increase the percentage of 11th grade students with continuous improvement on the state ACT assessment in reading and math, and just essentially move college and career readiness benchmark out?
Mm-hmm.
And then it almost reads the
Increase.
same.
Yep, can you say that again? Increase the percentage 11th grade students.
With the consistent improvement, on the state ACT assessment in reading and math. I'm missing that part, but.
Well, I think what I liked about where we started from was that there was categorical improvement, but I think we're struggling with this place that we're at, where these categories don't necessarily mean something quantitative. So in this first year, we're going to be looking for numerical improvement. I think that's what we're trying to say. Whether it's continue to improve, but it's to improve kind of the absolute average on the math and reading. And then this won't come into effect until subsequent years, but meeting that college career. I think it's TBD until we see what that looks like.
Agree, and we can't build that in to a KPI if we don't know what that is. So as of now, it hasn't changed. This is where it is.
We could keep it the way it is and just reflect back on it when we
Updated
get
it.
those
If the
scores.
benchmarks
I would
change.
agree. I would
or when.
agree.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
So full circle, I think we keep it as is.
Okay,
Yeah, knowing that that will probably change, the percentage will probably change.
And then we have to revisit it once we understand what that looks like. Okay.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, given that it's the ACT and nothing has changed about the test per se, we would be able to go back to prior year, wherever the cut line moves to, and map that from one year, trend that from last year to this year, and then continue to trend that forward. So I think we could keep it as is
okay.
without overcomplicating it. Are there any other thoughts about that? Okay. Sorry for that.
That's okay, I appreciate the conversation. I'm just trying to just get it all noted to be able to spit it back and move forward. So, so these three then, kind of full circle, would be the recommendation.
Anything else? Okay, this is also on the agenda for possible action.
I motion to approve the teaching and learning KPIs as recommended and presented.
Second?
Thank you. Further discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. All right. Are there any recommendations for future meetings? All right, seeing none. Our next teaching and learning meeting will be here in the boardroom on Tuesday, October 1st at 7 p.m. And that adjourns our meeting for tonight. Thanks, everybody.